On this video, we're going to talk about attachment injuries as trauma, and very specifically, how do you work with trauma? Thank you for joining. Stay tuned. Welcome to the New Love Addiction. I'm Alan Robarge. I'm a psychotherapist and a relationship coach. And today let's talk about love addiction, very specifically the three areas that we identify as love addiction, which are attachment injuries, developmental emotional trauma, and then also addictive thinking and addictive processes that are the result of dysfunctional family patterns and family systems. So I want to talk about trauma to begin to define and explore what exactly is trauma. And I want to make a distinction between incident-specific trauma and developmental trauma. So incident-specific trauma, it's an incident. And that's usually historically how we culturally would define trauma. We think of it as an event. So natural disasters such as tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, war is an incident, being in a car accident, something that happened at a specific time and place, or even if we don't know the time, we could say there's a window of time that we've noticed, and that a trauma is considered a kind of culturally collective understanding that yes, that is a traumatic event. Now, that definition is not really helpful to us when trying to understand trauma for an individual person's experience of traumatic symptoms and how they need to heal either from these traumatic symptoms or what we would refer to as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that is the result of trauma that goes unintegrated for a prolonged period of time. So as I mentioned, we're looking at incident-specific trauma, but now I want to also think about developmental trauma. Developmental trauma, as the word implies, is something that has happened over a period of time. So we cannot quite put our finger on and say, well, this event happened or this experience happened here or within a particular range of time. However, I am aware that collectively over a broad range of my development, as I'm developing and growing from childhood into adulthood, as I'm maturing, that I've experienced a particular level of stress and overwhelm and fear in such a way that my brain and my nervous system have coded these experiences into my body and nervous system as a kind of trauma. And the one place that this shows up very specifically, and which is also unique to love addiction, has to do with in relationships. So the attachment system, which is how our brains are mapped and coded to build relationships, to create connection and bonding with other people, that when we have a developmental trauma, it links to our attachment system. And so as adults, we are experiencing certain levels of stress and anxiety and fear and overwhelm that are showing up in our relationships, because relationships themselves, how we're connecting and how we're exchanging closeness and emotional connection, that actually is serving as a trigger. And the reason why it's a trigger is because in our history, we have a history of somehow, somewhere, either overtly or covertly being ignored or abandoned or neglected or abused. There's a rather broad range. But we will know that something is going on, particularly for those of us who identify as love addicts. We know something is going on because once we enter a relationship and we start relating with another person, we notice these bursts of confusion and energy and stress and adrenaline and overwhelm that oftentimes are not congruent with the situation. And what I mean by not congruent is that, for me, speaking from my own experience, is that when I'm in relationship and either there is a separation or a perceived separation, that the person that I'm with, my partner, is unavailable, how I would experience that emotional distancing is incongruent with the fact that there's some distancing. And the incongruence means that how my body and how my mind registers the intensity of that type of exchange is at an imbalance, and it is weighted more heavily as an extremely stressful, adrenaline-provoking experience, when in fact, logically, I know as an adult, from my mature adult thinking, that it doesn't make sense that I'm evidencing this level of fear. So it has taken me approximately 22 to 25 years to really understand where exactly is this coming from. And it's coming from an attachment injury, and this attachment injury is showing up in my nervous system and in my brain functioning as a developmental emotional trauma. Now, I want to rewind just a little bit, and in looking at incident-specific trauma, I want to share with you an idea that defining trauma is based upon each individual person's nervous system and their own level and degree of overwhelm. Trauma is not defined based upon collective communal agreement that it is a traumatic event. Let me be more clear. I'll explain this. Let's say there is a 4th of July firework picnic celebration, and the family is going to the 4th of July fireworks. And let's use in this example, a 3-year-old is in a stroller, and the 3-year-old has a stroller belt, or I don't know what you call it, a harness, and the child's in the stroller, and the child is supervised by adults. However, mom needs to leave, and mom needs to go to the car to get the picnic basket. And in that time that mom is gone, the fireworks begin, and they are loud and they are bright, and the child is age 3. This is the first time the child is really registering what are fireworks. And these loud, booming noises is actually frightening the child. And for whatever reason, in this example, let's identify or assume that the other adults are unable to offer any comfort and unable to attend to the child. And again, the child is harnessed in the stroller, so is confined. Mom is not there. It is stressful. It is overwhelming. It is scary. And the child's adrenaline in his or her nervous system is going to be very activated and turned on. If that child is unable to process the intensity of that experience, and the child's body is unable to work quickly enough to counter the flood of adrenaline in the nervous system, we will say that that child has now experienced a traumatic event. Now, if we would ask the other people in the area or the other family members and say, is the 4th of July, is having a picnic at the 4th of July traumatic? Most likely everyone would say, oh no, that's not traumatic. That's supposed to be fun. That's supposed to be a celebration. But we're not defining trauma based upon whether other people agree or disagree that something was traumatic. We're basing it on what is going on for each person's individual nervous system at the time, if we're using an incident, or if we're looking at developmentally, over time, what has happened to this person's body and nervous system so that when they're in simulated situations and they're activated with adrenaline, what kind of response are they having? And it's based upon response, which evidenced trauma symptoms, that we would say, oh, something is going on here. Something happened in their past, be it an incident or be it developmental emotional. It could be a form of an emotional trauma that's not based upon any type of external experience. It was how the child was treated emotionally. I want to share one more idea about trauma, which is really helpful when we begin to look at the symptoms and what's happening. That most people, when they're triggered, and this is true for people who suffer from love addiction, when they are in a very specific period, something has happened, there is an argument, a fight, a distancing, they're perceiving a disconnect from their partner. And their nervous system lights up, and there's this incredible anxiety and fear of needing some type of reassurance, some kind of validation, some kind of connection with the other person to say, please, let's reestablish trust and safety. Please, let's reestablish connection in order for my nervous system to calm down. Now, when that doesn't happen, the person's nervous system, the adrenaline, the fear, the overwhelm just keeps building and building and building. So for many people in those emergency states, we need to understand trauma because that's going to influence how exactly do we work with it when that is happening. Unfortunately, there's so much misinformation and confusion about what to do when we're in that moment. And a lot of pop psychology, or even what I'll call pop spirituality, pop positive psychology, is about focusing on thinking and focusing on self-affirmation and focusing on positive thinking. And there's an assumption that if I can just think the right thoughts, I'll think myself out of this adrenaline and this overwhelming situation. The example that I like to give here to make a distinction of really looking at the difference between psychology-based approach and a physiologically based approach, physiological, or an approach based on physiology as opposed to an approach based on psychology. The example I like to give is if my arm is bleeding. So if my arm is bleeding, we know what to do. We're going to wash the wound. I'm going to get some kind of compress. I'm going to put it on the wound. I'm going to apply pressure, and I'm attending to the body. It's a body process that's happening, and so the intervention, the way that I assist in helping my bleeding arm, is through a body-based approach. When this is happening, we are not going to ask, what is the quality of my thinking? I'm not going to say, what is my psychology of a bleeding arm? I'm not going to say, oh, I just need to tell myself some positive, affirming statements. I'm a good person. I'm good enough. I'm really a good person. My arm will stop bleeding because, you know, I'm independent. I'm clear of who I'm an authentic, independent, sincere person. And because I'm so clear about my affirming my sense of self, the bleeding will just magically stop on its own. It doesn't work like that. You would think I'm crazy if I told you to do that. This is so true also of trauma. This is what happens when our body is flooded with adrenaline and we're freaking out in those moments of separation with our partner, our loved one. It's not going to work to try to tell yourself, oh, just think positive thoughts and it will go away. Over time, it naturally just goes away because the body, gets exhausted and finally is able to calm down and come into equilibrium. But there are a number of things that we can do that are body-based interventions that allow us, similar to when, the example I gave of my arm bleeding, when I'm activated in that experience, I need to attend to it as a body-based intervention, not as a psychology-based intervention. Tracking and monitoring my thinking when I'm flooded in my nervous system with the hormones that are related to adrenaline is not going to help my body calm down and integrate the intensity of that experience. So for that reason, we need to educate ourselves on what are body-based processes. How do I focus on the physiology that's happening in those moments when my attachment injury is triggered, when the attachment injury is showing up as a developmental emotional trauma, and as my body is having this profound, incongruent, overwhelming reaction, how do I attend to that? That is the subject of future videos, upcoming videos. I hope that this video is helpful in laying the groundwork for understanding attachment injuries, understanding trauma, defining trauma, and beginning to create a framework for how we work with it. And as I've just mentioned, we have more upcoming videos to talk about what exactly are the approaches that we need to utilize on our own individually, and also with a partner, and also perhaps with a healing professional, such as a therapist or working in a group. All of these type of different approaches are going to help us heal from these developmental emotional traumas. So, thank you so much for listening and watching. This is Alan Robarge with the New Love Addiction. Please check out the Facebook group. We have this amazing group of people who are sharing all of their experiences and showing up as a support to each other. If you feel that you want to learn more information and have some conversation and dialogue, check out the Facebook group. And then also please subscribe to this YouTube channel because I'm going to be creating more videos that are hopefully serve as resources and help you make sense of what exactly is love addiction and how do we work with it. So, see you next time. Thank you. On this video, we're going to talk about how do you work with trauma. So please, please join me. Please join me and stay tuned. Please join me and stay tuned. That one was good. The last one was good. Here's another one. Let's see if it works. See you next time. Thank you.